27,000 feet above Caen, France. The oxygen mass couldn't hide Oberleutnant Ralph Hermach's smirk as he watched the ungainly silhouettes climbing laboriously toward his formation through the crystal-clear canopy of his faller. Wolf 190A5. The veteran ace of Jagdgeschwader 26 studied the American fighters making their combat debut over occupied Europe. "Die armies have sent us flying milk bottles," he transmitted to his wingman, unable to suppress his laughter at the sight of the massive Republic P-47 Thunderbolts struggling for altitude. Below them, 16 P-47C Thunderbolts of the 4th Fighter Group lumbered upward in tight formation, their 2,000-horsepower Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engines straining against their 7-ton weight. To German pilots accustomed to the sleek Spitfires and nimble Soviet fighters, these corpulent American machines appeared almost comical. Barrel-shaped fuselages, topped with greenhouse canopies, wings that seemed too small for their massive bodies, propellers that dwarfed anything in the Luftwaffe inventory. Hermesen didn't know what none of the German pilots circling like wolves above could have imagined, was that they were witnessing the arrival of the weapon that would systematically destroy the Luftwaffe's fighter arm. Within 18 months, these flying milk bottles would transform from objects of derision into instruments of terror, their 82 Browning machine guns becoming the most feared sound in German skies. The mathematics of destruction were already loaded in those broad wings. 400 rounds of ammunition, a combined rate of fire of 6,000 rounds per minute. Enough concentrated firepower to saw a messes in half in less than 2 seconds. The transformation began that April morning when Major Donald Billy, commanding the 335th Fighter Squadron, spotted the German formation positioning for attack. The former Eagle Squadron veteran, who had transferred from RAF Spitfires just weeks earlier, understood what his men didn't yet know. Survival in the P-47 required abandoning everything they thought they knew about air combat. The Thunderbolt represented a radical departure from conventional fighter design philosophy. While the Germans had pursued lightweight interceptors optimized for climb and turn performance, Republic Aviation had created something unprecedented, high-altitude juggernaut that used mass power and firepower to redefine the rules of aerial warfare. Among the 56 American pilots spread across the French sky that morning were men who would become legends. Future aims would strike fear into Luftwaffe hearts. But on April 8, 1943, were novices in an untested machine facing the most experienced fighter force in the world. The Germans had been fighting continuously since 1939 with veterans of Poland, France, and Russia. The Americans had been in combat for exactly 0 days. This story is about how industrial logic defeated tactical brilliance, quantity and quality merged into overwhelming superiority. German pilots' laughter turned to terror as they discovered what synchronized Browning machine guns could do to an aircraft at 400D. Republic P-47 Thunderbolt had emerged from a June 1940 panic. As German fighters swept across France, Alexander Kart, Republic Aviation's Georgian-born chief designer, received urgent specifications from the U.S. Army Air Corps. They wanted a high-altitude interceptor capable of matching the Luftwaffe's best. Cartelli designed instead was a monster that redefined the possible. "It will be a dinosaur," Cartelli admitted to his design team. "It will be a dinosaur with good proportions." The XP-47B prototype that first flew on May 6, 1941 shocked everyone who saw it. At 9,900 empty, it weighed 65% more than its predecessor, P-43 Lancer. The massive turbo supercharger system, with its complex ducting running through the rear fuselage, gave it an almost pregnant appearance. Pilots approaching it for the first time invariably asked the same question. This thing actually flies. Not only did it fly, it flew like nothing else at altitude. And Whitney R2800 double Wasp engine, an 18-cylinder radial producing 2,000 horsepower, could maintain full power at 27,000 feet where German fighters gasped for air. The turbo supercharger fed by exhaust gases delivered sea-level performance in the stratosphere where the air was too thin for conventional superchargers. Major Hubert Hub Zeker, commanding the 56th Fighter Group training at Bridgeport, Connecticut, initially despised the aircraft, lost 18 pilots and 41 aircraft in training accidents between September 1942 and January 1943. The P-47 killed more Americans in training than Germans would in the first months of combat. It ground-looped on landing, torque-rolled on takeoff, dove with such enthusiasm that pilots discovered compressibility, their controls freezing as shock waves formed on the wings. But those who mastered it discovered something extraordinary. Lieutenant Robert Johnson, a farm boy from Oklahoma who would become one of America's top aces with 27 victories, described his first flight. It was like strapping yourself to a locomotive. Power was unbelievable. You didn't fly it, you aimed it. The first combat encounters in April and May 1943 confirmed every German prejudice. The P-47s couldn't turn with the Fowler Wolf 190s, couldn't climb with the Messed 109s, couldn't match their nimble handling at medium altitudes. Luftwaffe pilots quickly developed tactics to exploit these weaknesses, attacking from below where the heavy Thunderbolts struggled, forcing turning fights where agility mattered more than firepower. Hutchman Lysef Pips Priller, commanding officer of Yokoschwada 26, reported to headquarters after his first encounter, "The new American fighter is meat for the slaughter. It flies like a truck, turns like a freight train, and climbs like a pregnant cow. Our boys are calling them Indiana targets pretending to be warriors." The statistics seem to confirm German confidence. In their first month of operations, the American fighter groups lost 14 Thunderbolts for only 3 confirmed German kills. The RAF, observing from their Spitfire squadrons, quietly suggested the Americans might reconsider their choice of mount. British pilots joked that the best evasive maneuver in a P-47 was to unstrap and run around the roomy cockpit. Something strange was happening in those early encounters that German intelligence failed to notice. The P-47s that were shot down had absorbed incredible punishment before falling. Aircraft returned from a May 4th mission with 21 cannon holes and over 100 machine gun strikes. Damage that would have disintegrated a Messerschmitt or Spitfire. The massive radial engine, lacking vulnerable coolant systems, shrugged off hits that would have stopped a liquid-cooled fighter cold. More significantly, when P-47s did get their guns on target, the results were catastrophic. The Thunderbolt's weapons battery created a convergence zone of destruction that German pilots had never experienced. Unlike the rifle-caliber weapons of early war fighters or the cannon with limited ammunition, the American fighter could maintain sustained fire for over 30 seconds. Eternity in aerial combat. The event that would begin changing German perceptions occurred on June 26, 1943 over Lazo, France. It involved Second Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson of the 61st Fighter Squadron and an encounter that would become legendary on both sides of the conflict. Johnson's formation of 48 P-47s was returning from escort duty when they were bounced by 16 Fowler Wolf 190s from 2 Agis E-26 led by headman Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland, younger brother of the famous Adolf Galland. The Germans executed a perfect attack, diving from the sun with overwhelming speed advantage. Johnson's Thunderbolt, flying at the rear of the formation, was caught in the crossfire of multiple attackers, taking catastrophic damage in the first seconds of combat. 120 Meuse cannon shells exploded across his aircraft. The canopy shattered, hydraulic fluid sprayed into the cockpit, the engine cowling was torn away, and fire erupted behind the instrument panel. Johnson, wounded in the nose and leg by shrapnel and bullet fragments, tried to bail out, but discovered the canopy was jammed. 20 mm shell had exploded in the canopy track, welding it shut. He was trapped in a dying aircraft at 27,000 fact. What happened next defied every assumption about combat damage tolerance. Despite having no forward visibility through the oil-covered windscreen, a barely functioning engine that shook violently and controls that responded only intermittently, Johnson managed to level the aircraft and point it toward England. The P-47 continued flying with damage that would have reduced any other fighter to falling debris. Then it got worse. A lone Focke-Wulf 190 flown by an unknown pilot from Tudor JG-26 discovered the crippled Thunderbolt limping toward the channel at less than 170 feet. Historical research has never 146 definitively identified this pilot, though several names have been proposed based on German combat reports from that 52 day. What followed was one of the most extraordinary encounters in aerial 58 warfare history. The German pilot positioned himself behind Johnson's P-47-1103 and opened fire with his 420mm cannon and two 13mm machine guns. Johnson, 1110, unable to evade, could only huddle behind his armor plate and pray. The 1115 Thunderbolt absorbed the entire cannon ammunition load. Then the German repositioned and fired again, 1122 with only his machine guns. The cannon ammunition exhausted, the German pilot 1127 pulled alongside, staring in disbelief at the flying wreck. Johnson could see 1132, his face clearly young blonde, his expression shifting from confidence to 1137 confusion to something approaching fear. The German repositioned and emptied his 1143 remaining machine gun ammunition into the Thunderbolt. Still it flew. He 1148 pulled alongside again, shook his head in apparent amazement, gave an informal salute and peeled away, presumably out 1155 of ammunition. Johnson's P-47 landed at Manston with its engine failing on the 1200 runway. The crew chief stopped counting bullet holes after reaching 200. One 12,006 cannon shell had exploded inches from Johnson's head. Another had detonated against the armor plate behind his seat. T-14, the engine had taken direct hits. The control cables were partially severed. 12Z-19, three of the four main longerons, the structural backbone of the fuselage, were shot through. Yet the aircraft at 12Z-26 brought him home. The survival of Johnson's aircraft sent shock waves through both air forces. American 2033 engineers studying the wreckage realized they had underestimated their own creation. German intelligence receiving 2040 combat reports from 2nd Section of Jägerschwader 26 initially refused to 12Z-45 believe it. No aircraft could absorb that much punishment. Testimony from 1051 multiple pilots confirmed the impossible. The Thunderbolt had taken everything the Luftwaffe's best fighter 2057 could deliver and survived. By July 1943, American pilots were learning to exploit 1304, the P-47's true strengths. Lieutenant Colonel Hubert Zehner, the 56th Fighter 1310 Group Commander, discovered the secret through brutal trial and error. Don't turn with them. Don't climb with 1317 them at low altitude. Use your weight. Use your power. Use your guns. The 1323 Thunderbolt's massive weight, initially seen as a disadvantage, became a weapon. 13 and 28 in a dive, nothing could catch it. From 30,000 feet, a P-47 could reach 550 mph, 37 faster than any German fighter could achieve, even in a vertical dive. This speed could be converted to altitude in 13,043, a zoom climb that left pursuing fighters helplessly behind. Walker Bard 13-49 Mahurin, who would become one of the first American aces in Europe, developed what became known as the boom and zoom 1357 tactic. It's called it the Thunderbolt Turkey Shoot. 1402, instead of engaging in traditional dogfights, P-47 formations would climb to 1408 30,000 ft, then German fighters could effectively operate. When Luftwaffe 14-15 fighters appeared below, the Thunderbolts would roll inverted and dive, reaching speeds that made 1420 deflection shooting impossible for defending Germans. At the bottom of these dives, the American heavy machine 1427 guns would speak. Pilots who survived described it as facing a wall 14s and 32 of lead, the combined firepower creating an impenetrable zone of destruction. 39 aircraft caught in this convergence pattern didn't just fall, they disintegrated. 1445, the true revelation of American firepower, came during the August 17th, 43 dual raid on Schweinfurt and 14,052 Regensburg, the deepest penetration into Germany attempted to that date. This 14,058 mission would demonstrate both the P-47's limitations, its range even with drop 15-03 tanks, and its terrifying effectiveness when employed properly. Major David Schilling, leading the 62nd 15-11 Fighter Squadron, a formation of Messerschmitt 110 destroyer aircraft positioning to attack B-17s with 15 Indien, their heavy cannon and rocket armament. The twin-engine German fighters, armed but less 1524 maneuverable, were the Luftwaffe's specialized bomber killers. Schilling's flight of 4 Thunderbolts rolled into 15s and 31 their attack dive from 28th and Feen. Fitzhugh Roth, a gunner in 1/15 of 37 of the Mi-10s who survived, later recounted in a P interrogation. 1544, the American fighters came down like hammers from heaven. Opened fire at 1549 800 me good hits. I saw them strike the fighter's wing. The P-47 didn't even 1556 wobble. Then he fired. The aircraft ahead of us simply came apart. Not shot 1602 down. Wings separated from fuselage. Tail severed. The crew 1607 compartment shredded into metal confetti. In 2 seconds, a 110 became 16s and 13 nothing. Messes were hundreds and tens were destroyed 16-18 in less than a minute. The German pilots had never experienced such concentrated 16s and 23 firepower. Each P-47 carried 425 rounds per gun. 400 rounds total weighing 1632, nearly 900 lb. At convergence distance typically set 1637 at 300 ED. All 8 guns' ballistic paths intersected in a zone roughly 1643 in diameter. In that zone faced 100 projectiles per second, each 1649 traveling at 2/900th pers. The ammunition itself was a revelation 1655 of American industrial capacity. German fighters struggled with limited 1700 cannon ammunition, typically 120 to 200 rounds for a 20 mm weapon. American 1707 pilots could maintain fire for over half a minute. The standard combat load mixed 1713 armor-piercing incendiary tracer, and standard ball ammunition in patterns 17 and 20 designed to both destroy and ignite. Lieutenant Colonel Francis Gabby 17-26 Gabreski, who would become the top American ace in Europe with 28 victories, described the effect. 17-33, when you hit them with all 8, they don't just go down, they explode. I saw 1738 a 109 literally cut in half, the tail falling one way, the nose and wings 1743 another. The pilot never knew what hit him. By September 1943, the Luftwaffe was 1751 discovering another horrifying reality about the P-47. Its performance improved 1756 dramatically with altitude while German fighters suffered. The turbo-supercharged double Wasp engine 18-3 maintained its rated power output up to 30,000 ft. Fighters relying on 1808 single-stage or two-stage mechanical superchargers saw their performance degrade significantly above 25,000 ft. 1816 Oberleutnant Hans Philipp, one of Germany's most successful aces with 262 victories, encountered this reality fatally on October 8, 1943. 18 Jagdschade against a B-17 formation at 28 Zorft over Bremen. 1834 Philipp found his Faller Wolf 190A6 sluggish and unresponsive in the thin 1840 air. The BMW 81 engine, powerful at medium altitudes, was gasping for oxygen 1847 nearly 6 mi above the Earth when P-47's the 56th Fighter Group dove 1853 on his formation from 32 aft. German fighters were sitting ducks. 1859 Robert Johnson, now an experienced combat pilot on his way to ace status, was flying at 31 Zalosnft when he spotted 1907 Philipp's distinctive Focke-Wulf with its elaborate nose art. Johnson's Combat 1930 report was clinical, opened fire at 300 wide, 30 degrees deflection, observed strikes 1920 along entire fuselage. Enemy aircraft exploded, no parachute observed. 1907 Philipp's death sent shock waves through the Luftwaffe. If one of their best, 1932 man who had survived over 500 combat missions on both Eastern and Western fronts, couldn't survive against the 1938 Thunderbolts, what chance did average pilots have? The German High Command 1944 ordered an immediate investigation into the P-47's capabilities. The report 1949 delivered to Reich Marshal Hermann Göring in November 1943 was sobering. 1955 the Thunderbolt service ceiling exceeded 42,000 ft, higher than any German 2000 fighter could reach. Its dive speed approached the sound barrier. Its armor 2006 included a 338 in steel plate behind the Pili 2 in bulletproof glass 2011 windscreen and armored deflection plates around the engine. Most disturbingly, its rugged construction 2018 allowed it to absorb damage that would destroy 3 conventional fighters and still return home. In January 1944, 20-26 new variant of the P-47 began arriving in England that would complete the transformation from Laughingstock to 20-33 Nightmare. P-47D-22 featured a Hamilton Standard Hydraulic 2039 propeller with paddle blades 13 ft in diameter with broad chord blades that bit 1044 into the air like massive O's. The improvement in climb rate was immediate and dramatic. where earlier Thunderbolts 20s and 52 had climbed at an anemic 200 pfaft per minute at sea level. Paddleblade 20 and 57 variants could achieve 3,000 per minute, matching or exceeding German fighters at most altitudes. The massive 2105 propeller also improved acceleration. P-47s to build energy faster in 2011 level flight. Hetman Heinz Knoker of Jagdschad 11, a 2116 veteran with over 200 combat missions, encountered the new variants in February 1944 during a bomber interception near Hanover. He wrote in his combat diary 20s and 28, "The fat American fighters have learned to climb. We bounced a formation near 21s and 33 Hanover, expecting our usual advantage. They turned into us and climbed with us. 20s and 39 when we tried to disengage, they followed us up to 30,000. Was Twin 144 caught and blown apart. Nothing left but smoke and fragments. These are not the 21s and 50 same machines we laughed at last year." Paddle blade propeller did more than improve performance. It changed the 21s and 57 sound of the Thunderbolt. The distinctive thundering roar created by the blade tips reaching supersonic 22,003 speeds could be heard from miles away. German ground troops reported being able 22,008 to identify approaching P-47s by sound alone. A deep threatening rumble that 2015 meant death from above. Began calling it Donnerschlag Thunderclap 2020 by March 1944. P-47s equipped with external fuel tanks could escort bombers 20-27 deep into Germany. The standard configuration carried two 100 wing 20-32 tanks or a 7-Feigal belly tank extending range to over 1,000. The 2240 paddle blade propeller providing improved performance even when loaded. Thunderbolts could fight on equal terms 2046 immediately after dropping tanks. Luftwaffe's response was to concentrate on the bombers, hoping to inflict enough 22-53 losses to stop the American daylight campaign. This required flying through the P-47 22-59 escort screen, an increasingly suicidal proposition. Pilots developed a grudging 2306 respect that bordered on fear for the big American fighters. Major G.A. Roll won 23 several of Germany's top aces with 275 victories, mostly on the Eastern Front. 2318 survived an encounter with P-47s on March 6, 1944 that left him badly wounded. 2325 he later recalled in a post-war interview, "We saw them above us, 20-30 silhouettes against the sun. Someone laughed and said, 'Here come the flying pigs.' Nobody was laughing 30 seconds, 2338 later. They came down like an avalanche, faster than we could react. The first 2343 pass destroyed three of our fighters just gone, transformed into burning debris. Their guns didn't fire in bursts 2351 like ours, poured out solid streams of fire. Getting caught in that stream 2013-57 meant instant death. The escort missions revealed another P-47 2403 advantage, endurance. German fighters operated at maximum power settings that consumed 2409 fuel rapidly. The big American radials could cruise efficiently at high altitude. Thunderbolts could remain with 24s and 16 the bombers for hours, rotating top cover while maintaining enough fuel for combat and return. More P-4 Mustangs 2040-25 arrived to take over long-range escort duties in spring 1944. P-47 units increasingly focused on ground 24-32 attack, a role that would make them the most feared aircraft in the German arsenal. The transition began in earnest 24-39 in April 1944 as the Allies prepared for the invasion of France. Thunderbolt's 24-46 heavy machine gun battery proved equally effective against ground targets. The 24s and 51 standard armor, piercing incendiary ammunition could penetrate the top armor of most German vehicles, while the sheer 24s and 58 volume of fire could destroy soft targets in seconds. Conburst put 25-360 half in projectiles into a target area the size of a truck. It was the 2509 addition of bombs and rockets that transformed the P-47 into a true multi-role monster. D-25 variant 25s and 21s and L bombs under the wings and a 500-pounder under the 20-22 fuselage, a bomb load equal to early war medium bombers. 25th and 28 zero-length rocket stubs for 10.5 in high-velocity aircraft rockets HVRs 25-35, each equivalent to a 105 miles artillery shell. Burst Hans von Luck commanding 2041, the 125th Panzer Grenadier Regiment during the Normandy campaign experienced 25-46 P-47 ground attacks firsthand. They came in low, so low you could see 25 and 52 the pilots' faces. The sound was terrifying, engines roaring, rockets 25-57 screaming. Then the hammer of those heavy machine guns. Column of our trucks simply ceased to exist. 2026 Size-05 vehicles transformed into burning wreckage in one pass. The psychological effect on the men was devastating. They 2060-12 called them Jabus, bombers, but these were something beyond that. They 2060-17 were flying artillery with the accuracy of snipers. On June 6, 1944, the Luftwaffe 26 and 25 discovered how completely the balance of power had shifted. Over 500 P-47s 26 and 31 provided air cover for the invasion, creating an impenetrable umbrella over the beaches. Fighters attempting 26 and 38 to reach the landing zones were massacred. Oberleutnant Wolfgang Fischer of Jagdgeschwader 26 and 452, one of only 3 German pilots to reach the beaches that day, reported the 26 and 50 sky belonged to the Americans. Bolts were stacked from sea level to 30,000 feet. We tried to break through 2657 at dawn. 12 fighters from our grouper. I was the only one to return. P-47s 2704 were waiting at every altitude. You couldn't climb over them, couldn't dive under them. Their guns turned our 27 and 10 fighters into aluminum rain. In the weeks following D-Day, 7s and 16s systematically destroyed German movement in daylight. The statistics were staggering. In June alone, 9th Air 2723 Force Thunderbolts claimed 651 locomotives, 3 84-727-29 trucks, 12 tanks and armored vehicles, and 4 553-2736 horse-drawn vehicles destroyed. The Wehrmacht was forced to move only at night, severely hampering their ability 2743 to respond to Allied advances. The Germans tried everything to counter the Thunderbolt threat. They reinforced 2750 vehicle armor, deployed more anti-aircraft guns, developed new camouflage techniques. Nothing worked. 2758. The P-47's combination of speed, armor, and firepower made them nearly unstoppable. Even the feared 88 mm Flak 2807 guns struggled to track the fast-moving fighters at low altitude. While devastating Europe, P-47 was 2080-14 simultaneously proving its worth in the Pacific theater. The 348th Fighter Group 2080-20 operating from New Guinea discovered that the Thunderbolt's qualities were perfectly suited to the vast distances 28s and 26 and harsh conditions of the Pacific War. Commanding the 2832 348th developed tactics specifically for the Pacific. On October 11, 1943, 28s in 39 Kirby led 4 P-47s against 40 Japanese aircraft over Waiwok, shooting down 6 2846 enemy planes himself in a single mission, earning him the Medal of Honor. The Japanese, accustomed to fighting 2853 nimble but fragile American fighters, unprepared for the P-47's combination of firepower and durability. 2901 Japanese ace Saburo Sakai, who encountered P-47s over New Guinea, later 2906 wrote, "We called them monsters." 20 MAV cannon, which could destroy a P-40 2913 with a few hits, seemed to have no effect. I put dozens of rounds into one 2918 Thunderbolt and watched it fly away. Their return fire was terrifying, 2090-23 streams of heavy bullets that tore aircraft apart. The P-47N 2930, developed specifically for the Pacific, featured increased fuel capacity with wet wings holding 93 gallons each, 2937 extending range to 350 mi. This variant would escort B-29s to 2944 Japan, proving that the short-legged fighter of 1943 had evolved into a true 2950 long-range weapon. The ultimate vindication of the P-47's evolution came 1956 in its encounters with German jet fighters. Mesmit Mitu 62 Thurzul-1 with its 540 uplift top speed should have been untouchable by propeller-driven Thurzul-7 fighters. But Thunderbolt pilots discovered they could catch jets in 2 situations. During takeoff and landing 30 Fufu, when jets were most vulnerable, and in high-speed dives from altitude. On 30 and 20 November 27, 1944, Lieutenant Colonel John C. Murr of the 355 Fighter Group 1027 became one of the first pilots to shoot down an M62 with a P-47. 3032 Deving from 28,000 feet. Mear's Thunderbolt reached speeds approaching 500 mmf, 339 enough to catch the jet in level flight. The jet pilot, confident in his speed advantage, never saw the diving P-47 30,047 until Mear's guns opened up at 400 d. Combat report noted, the enemy 30-54 aircraft disintegrated under fire. Large pieces, including both engines, 30s and 59, separated from the fuselage. The pilot did not escape. Concentrated fire of 30-150 caliber guns proved more effective than we anticipated against jet aircraft. By early 1945, 30 and 15 P-47M variants were deployed, specifically to counter German jets and V-1 flying 31-19 bombs. With water methanol injection boosting power to 2,800 horsepower and 31-25 refined aerodynamics, these ultimate Thunderbolts could reach 470 miles in 31s and 31 level flight at 30 low sands to intercept even jets under certain 31s and 36 conditions. Major George Bostwick, commanding the 63rd Fighter Squadron equipped with 3143 P-47s, shot down two M262s in March 1945. In 49, his tactical report emphasized firepower over speed. The jets are faster, but 31s and 55, they can't turn and they can't take punishment. One good burst from our battery, they come apart like 3200, they're made of paper. They have to slow down to attack bombers. That's when we get them. Ultimate demonstration of 3207 American industrial might came during Operation Bodenplatte. The Luftwaffe's desperate attempt to destroy 32T-13 Allied air power on January 1, 1945. Nearly 900 German fighters, including 3221, their best remaining pilots, launched surprise attacks on Allied airfields across Belgium and the Netherlands. At 32-28Y-34 airfield near Metz, to the 365th Fighter Group's P-47s, the attack 3035 initially succeeded. German fighters destroyed 22 Thunderbolts on the ground, 32,040 along with several other aircraft. Captured German pilot brought to the command post pointed at the burning 32-47 aircraft and taunted, "What do you think of that?" Major George Brooking's response became 32V-54 legendary throughout the 9th Air Force. He pointed to the flight line where ground crews were already pushing 3,300 damaged aircraft aside and preparing hard stands for replacements. 3305 by tomorrow will have 40 new ones. Long will it take you to replace your pilots? The German pilot Smirk 3312 disappeared. Within 48 hours, factory-fresh P-47D-40s 3018s filled the flight line, flown in from depots in England. Luftwaffe's 3034-271 aircraft and 213 pilots in Bodenplatte, including many irreplaceable 3330 instructors and squadron leaders. These losses they could never replace. 3336 Americans lost Hun-34 aircraft total across all attacked airfields, all replaced 3342 within a week. The numbers told the story of inevitable defeat. Republic 33 Force in Aviation produced 15 6 and 83 P-47s during the war, more than any other 33V4 American fighter. At peak production, Farmingdale Factory on Long Island completed one 30-40-100 Thunderbolt every hour around the clock. The Evansville plant in Indiana built 3405 from empty farmland in 1942, month by 34/11/1944. Each P-47D required 65,000 individual 34,000 parts, 8 mi of electrical wiring, 2,000 of aluminum and 300 of rubber. The engine alone contained 400 individual components machined to tolerances of thousandth of an inch. 4,032 yet American workers, many of them women who had never seen an aircraft before Pearl Harbor, assembled these 3438 complex machines with precision that exceeded peacetime standards. Ammunition was ELI-445 staggering. Each P-47 sortie required 400 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition, 34s and 53 with hundreds of Thunderbolts flying daily missions. Consumption exceeded 10 million rounds per month by 34-59 mid-1944. The Lake City Arsenal in Missouri, one of several ammunition plants, produced 35-6 30 million rounds monthly. Each cartridge was manufactured to tolerances measured in 10,000 of an inch, ensuring 35 and 15 reliable feeding through the synchronized gun mechanisms. The fuel consumption was enormous. Each 35-1 Thunderbolt burned 100 gall per hour in normal flight, up to 300 gall in combat, 35-27 with water injection engaged. The 9th Air Force alone consumed over 25 million gallons of aviation fuel monthly by late 1944. 35-38, all of it shipped across the Atlantic in tankers that were themselves products of American mass production. Even more 35-45 impressive than aircraft production was pilot training. By 1944, 35 and V1 states was graduating 30,000 pilots annually from advanced training, more 35-56 than Germany had trained in the entire war. 47 pilot received a minimum 30-6502 of 400 hours of flight training before entering combat, including 100 hours in 36-607 advanced fighters. German pilots, by contrast, were entering combat with less 30-60-12 than 100 hours total time by war's end. The quality showed in combat. American 30-61 pilots arrived in Europe trained in formation flying, instrument navigation, gunnery, and tactics. They had practiced 36,027 against captured German aircraft, understanding their enemy's capabilities and limitations. 6 and 3-3, they knew their aircraft systems intimately, having studied technical manuals that German pilots never 36 and 39 received. Lieutenant Eugene Roberts, arriving in England in September 1944, exemplified 360-46, the American training advantage. I had 420 hours in my logbook, 30-60-52, including 75 hours in the P-47. I'd fired at towed targets, practiced 30-58 deflection shooting, studied gun camera film from actual combat. My first 37W3 mission, I knew exactly what to do. The German pilot I faced couldn't have had 37-09, half my experience. It wasn't even a fair fight. March 1947, Prilla. 37s and never seen the same pilot who had mocked the P-47s as pregnant cows 2 years earlier, was 3723 interviewed by German propaganda officials seeking to boost morale. His statement, deemed too demoralizing for 3730 publication, revealed the complete transformation in German attitudes. The 37-35 Thunderbolt is the best fighter bomber ever built. Its firepower is unprecedented. Weapons that never jam, 37s and 42 never overheat, never run out of ammunition in normal combat. It carries bombs like a medium bomber, 37-48 rockets like artillery, and fights like a fighter when needed. But beyond the machine is what its 37s and 55 represents. Unlimited American production. They lose 10, they build 20. 80-100, we lose 1, it's gone forever. Their pilots arrive better trained than our 30-80-05 instructors. They have fuel for training, ammunition for practice, spare parts for everything. Nothing 30-80-30 but courage. And courage without resources is just delayed defeat. We 38-18 laughed at them in 1943. We're not laughing now. When you hear those guns, 80-23, you know death has come calling. The sound haunts us. Mechanical, precise, 30-80-29, unstoppable. Like everything American, it's about overwhelming material superiority. They didn't beat us through 30-80-36 better tactics or braver pilots. They buried us under an avalanche of steel and lead. 38C-43, by April 1945, the Luftwaffe existed largely on paper. Fuel shortages 30-49 grounded most aircraft. Experienced pilots were dead or captured. Airfields 30-54 were cratered ruins. But even with aircraft and fuel, German pilots faced 30-90-100, an impossible equation. Attacking meant facing P-47 formations that owned every 3906 altitude from ground level to 40,000 feet. Feldwebel Klaus Brechender, one of the 39 pilots trained in 1945, flew exactly one combat mission before 3918 the war ended. His encounter with P-47s over Leipzig lasted 12 seconds. Saw 39-5 them diving from above, 4 Thunderbolts in perfect formation. I tried to turn, but they were too fast. 39s and 33 the leader fired from 500 meters. Aircraft shook like it was hit by sledgehammers. 39s and 39 the engine exploded, the wings separated. I barely escaped. In the parachute, I 39s and 45 watched them destroy my entire staff. 6 fighters gone in under a minute. The 39-50 sky rained, burning aluminum and bodies. The psychological impact was complete. 39-56 German pilots developed what medical officers called jabbo fever, physical symptoms of stress appearing when 40-3 Thunderbolts were reported in the area. Who had faced Spitfires and 40-8 Hurricanes without fear became physically ill before missions against P-47s. 4-102 the distinctive thunder of approaching Thunderbolts caused panic among ground troops who knew that survival meant 40-21, finding cover immediately. The final statistics of P-47 operations 427 defied comprehension. In Europe, 3 752 German aircraft destroyed in aerial 40s and 34 combat, 3 315 aircraft destroyed on the ground, 4s and 40 railway cars destroyed, 9,000 locomotives destroyed, 6,000 armored 40s and 46 fighting vehicles destroyed, 68,000 trucks destroyed, 60,000 horse-drawn 453 via the Pacific, 697 Japanese aircraft destroyed in aerial 4100 combat, 150 aircraft destroyed on the ground, 1,500 vehicles destroyed, 450 locomotives destroyed, countless barges, ships and installations. 415 of the 9th Air Force alone, primarily equipped with P-47s, flew 213-873 402 combat sorties, 120,000 tons of bombs, fired 135 million rounds of 4130 ammunition and launched 60,000 rockets. The Thunderbolt units achieved a 4.61-4-137 kill ratio in aerial combat while maintaining the lowest loss rate of any Allied fighter bomber. Behind these 4144 numbers lay the human cost. Luftwaffe lost approximately 28,000 pilots, killed 4150 in combat against Western Allied forces. Many fell to the concentrated fire of 41-56 American heavy machine guns. Each loss represented years of training that Germany could never replace. By war's 42-3 end, the average German fighter pilot had less than 30 hours of combat experience. Average P-47 pilot had 42:11/200. At the Luftwaffe Interrogation Center at Oberursel, captured Allied pilots were 42:18, debriefed by German intelligence. The records captured in 1945 revealed German 42-10-24 assessments of Allied aircraft. The file on the P-47 updated continuously 42-30 throughout the war showed the complete reversal of opinion. Vorpal 1937 large, unmaneuverable fighter, inferior to German types in all performance parameters except dive speed. Machine 1445 gun armament insufficient against cannon-armed fighters. Assessment minimal threat. December 1943 42-54 exceptional high-altitude performance. Extreme structural strength. Power 4300 increasingly problematic. Pilots showing improved tactics. Assessment 4305 significant threat above 20,000 June 1944 43-11 dominant fighter bomber superior to all German types above 20,000 Fate firepower 43T devastating against all target types structural strength makes shootdown extremely difficult. Assessment Freethal critical threat at all altitudes March 1945 43-31 best fighter bomber of the war combination of firepower durability and performance unmatched quality 43T38 exceptional assessment unsurvivable in direct engagement 43D44 in 1985 at a reunion of German and American fighter pilots in Phoenix, Arizona. Adversaries met in 4351 peace. General Lieutenant Adolf Galland, former head of the Luftwaffe fighter arm 4357, was asked about the P-47. His response, recorded on video, captured 4403 the complete transformation. We made a terrible mistake in 1943. We 4409 saw this big heavy fighter and laughed. The Americans don't understand air combat. We said they built a bomber and 4417 called it a fighter. We were the ones who didn't understand. The Americans didn't try to build a 4423 European fighter. They built an American one designed around production, 4428 firepower and survivability. They understood that in a war of attrition, plane that could take 4434 punishment and deliver devastating firepower would win. They were right. 44740. The first time I flew a captured P-47 after the war, I understood everything. 446 the power was incredible. It climbed like it was falling upward. The cockpit was comfortable. The visibility 44-52 excellent. The controls precise. It was a pilot's aircraft wrapped in armor. But 4458, what really impressed me was realizing that America built over 15,000 of these complex machines while fighting a 2-4505 ocean war. Each one required an engine more complex than anything Germany 45510 produced. Yet they built them faster than we could build simple fighters. That's when I knew we never had a 4557 chance. Those guns, we called them Roosevelt's piano because of the sound they made. 45s and 24, once you heard that sound, you never forgot it. Many of my friends heard it for the last time. P-47 didn't just 4531 defeat the Luftwaffe, it destroyed it. The P-47's design represented American 4538 industrial philosophy perfectly. Force engineering backed by unlimited resources. Every component was 45545 overbuilt, overpowered, and over-engineered. The wing spars could support 40,000 45s and 52, 3 times the aircraft's loaded weight. The engine mount could withstand 12D's forces. The control cables were 46500 doubled throughout with automatic backup systems. The ammunition feed system alone was a marvel of engineering. 846C08 separate ammunition boxes, each holding 425 rounds through electric boost 460-14 motors to prevent jamming during hygiene maneuvers. The guns were electrically 416-windine, heated to prevent freezing at altitude, had its own charging mechanism 4624 and could be individually synchronized. The convergence was adjustable from 150 460-30 to 400 with pilots to optimize for their preferred engagement range. 4.6 and 3.6. Even after the war, some German veterans maintained that the P-47 won through 464-1 quantity, not quality. German fighters were technically superior but overwhelmed by numbers. The Combat 460s from FE8 records tell a different story. In engagements where numbers were equal, 653 P-47s consistently prevailed. The heavy machine gun armament, dismissed as 460-59 inferior to cannon, proved more effective in actual combat. Analysis of gun camera footage revealed 4706Y cannon shells, while individually more destructive, required precise aim 40-70-12 and had limited ammunition, typically 120 to 200 rounds total. The P-47's weapons created a probability cloud of bullets that guaranteed hits 47-24 even with imperfect aim. At typical engagement ranges, burst put 47-30 at least 20 rounds into a fighter-sized target, enough to ensure destruction. 47-36, the ammunition itself was superior. American 50 calibre rounds, 47s and 53, used a delayed action fuse that ensured penetration before detonation. 47Ls and 48, the incendiary compound burned at 3 Zosen-Gref, enough to ignite aluminum. 47-54 structure. German 20mm shells, while heavier, often exploded on surface 4800 contact, causing spectacular but sometimes superficial damage. P-47-4826 Thunderbolt remains the heaviest single-engine piston fighter ever mass-produced. 4812, its empty weight of 10,000 lb exceeded the gross weight of some twin-engine fighters. Its engine produced more power, 48-9 than entire bomber formations from the previous war. Its weapons delivered more firepower than a squad of infantry. Yet 48-27, it was built by the thousands, flown by kids barely out of high school, and maintained under combat conditions by 48-33 mechanics who learned their trade in weeks. The transformation of German opinion from mockery to terror took less 48-40 than 2 years. In that time, the flying milk bottle became the most feared aircraft in the Luftwaffe's experience. 40-40 veterans who had faced Spitfires, Hurricanes, and Soviet Yaks without flinching spoke of P-47s in hushed tones. 48s and 56 decades after the war. At the United States Air Force Museum in Dayton, 49Z02 restored P-47D sits among other legendary fighters. Its placard lists 4908 specifications and battle honors. The real story is told by a small 40-90-13 display case containing spent 0.50 caliber shells and a strip of gun camera 40-90-18 film showing a Forley Wolf 190 disintegrating under fire. Below the 490-4 display is a quote from an unnamed German pilot taken from a 1945 interrogation report. "We laughed when we 40-90-32 first saw them. Fat, ugly American fighters that couldn't turn, couldn't fight. We stopped 49,039 laughing when we realized they didn't need to turn or climb. They just pointed those guns at you, and you ceased to 49-45 exist." The laughter died with our comrades. The P-47 Thunderbolt entered combat as an 49-53 object of derision and ended the war as an instrument of annihilation. In 49-58, between synchronized Browning machine guns rewrote the rules of aerial 50-03 warfare and buried the Luftwaffe under an avalanche of lead. Pilots at 50-09 laughed at the ungainly American fighter in April 1943. By May 1945, there were no German pilots 50-90 left to laugh. The thunder had spoken. The sky belonged to America. Thanks, Roth, watching.